Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Managing Mental Health in Challenging Times seminar today with David Beeney. It's a great privilege to welcome so many of you onto this webinar today. My name is Dan Taylor, and I'm the Managing Director of Morgan Hunt. 12 months ago, we began working with David, the founder of Breaking the Silence. We had a seminar in our London office and 65 people turned up. We knew that David's message resonated with so many people that day, and as a result of that seminar, we rolled out a series of events across the UK, culminating in 100 people turning up to Glasgow College to see David just before Christmas. In January of this year, we booked David to speak to us again in London on the 6th of May. We were hoping to coincide this live event with the Mental Health Awareness Week, which runs between the 18th and the 24th of May. We also wanted it to coincide with the launch of our new brand, Morgan Hunt's new brand, which includes the strapline, Inspiring Working Lives. Part of our mission is bringing people together to inspire and improve the working world. Now, COVID-19 has put a stop to our new brand. We've had to delay that. And naturally, today we can't all meet together, which is a great shame. But I'm delighted so many people are online to listen to David's words of wisdom. Because if the issue of mental health awareness was a problem back in January, I'm sure that after 7 weeks of lockdown, it is a greater issue. And I suspect that some of those problems will remain and grow post-lockdown when we all get back to work in a normal fashion. The rules of today's seminar are as follows. You will find a little question mark on the central control bar. That is our Q&A section. If you click on that, you can comment, and David will be asking you to comment throughout the seminar about how you're getting on and how you're finding things. So please click on that box and comment, but you can also ask questions in there. And we'll be going through the live questions that you have asked during this seminar at the end of David's talk. So I'm delighted to welcome David. His personal experience, his engaging style, his empathy, together with real actions, make him perfectly placed to talk and lead on this challenging subject. I'm also joined by my colleague, Claire Canary, who is our Director for Digital and Technology, and she also heads up Diversity and Inclusion at Morgan Hunt. And Claire will be asking the questions. So I'm handing over to the both of you.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Dan, and hello, everybody, and a particularly warm welcome to David this morning. So, David, I understand you've been ill with coronavirus yourself. So, most importantly, first question, how are you now?
Thanks, Claire, and thanks, Dan. I'm pleased to report I'm a lot better. I've still got a bit of a cough. Been coughing for about 5 weeks now, but I count myself as really lucky. Yes, I had about 10 days of a high fever, and yes, I self-isolated in the same room for 21 days with my fiance delivering my food on a tray. But I'm lucky because I never got that real shortness of breath that meant I got worried about being hospitalized. So I'm feeling so much better, thank you. And just to also share with everyone here today, I was, Lisa and I were due to get married a couple of weeks ago, so we should have just got back from honeymoon. But like many people, we're going through, there's so much worse things going on that we've got perspective, and we've moved on from that now. And we've booked our wedding again for next year. But it's great to be here, and I am feeling so much better. Thank you.
Great. I'm glad to hear that, David. And as you say, perspective is everything at the moment. So for those who don't know you, David, and haven't heard you speak before, could you tell us about your background and in particular, talk to us about the work of the organisation you founded, Breaking the Silence?
Thanks, Claire. I'm one of those people. I spent 36 years, I think it was, working in media, having a very normal career, but I was hiding a dark secret. And that dark secret was that I was battling with mental health, panic attacks, anxiety. But I didn't realize myself that nobody knew in my entire life what I was going through. None of my work colleagues, none of my mates down the pub, and none of my family. But my whole life changed forever on the 16th of May, 2016, when I outed myself. And it really has changed my life. I kept being asked to share my mental health story more and more. And I must admit, when I first started sharing it, it resonated with more people and at a deeper level than anything I've done in my life before. But I started getting a fairly standard response, which concerned me. And that standard response was, thank you for sharing your mental health story, David. Today I realized I'm normal, but I'm going to be honest with you. I could never share my true mental health with my employer because I believe it would have a negative impact on my career. So I realized very early on that it wasn't enough to tell my mental health story. What I needed to do was to go into organizations to help them to create kinder cultures of trust in the workplace, where we made it really safe for people to open up and talk about their well-being. Already by then, a number of companies were recruiting or appointing people as mental health champions or well-being ambassadors. But I realized that just wasn't enough in isolation. I needed to work with organizations to work out if we could have a cultural shift for a more compassionate style of leadership. And I've been very privileged in the last 3 years to work with many organizations around their culture and making it easier for people to talk about mental health. What I would like to share with you as well this morning, Claire, right at the beginning was, as I say, I battled throughout my career with panic attacks, and they've never gone away. And there's a very large audience listening to this webinar this morning. So people would naturally want to ask the question, you know, how can I avoid a panic attack this morning? When I was first ever asked that question, I said to people, I don't really know the answer, but there's a line in we've got to understand with mental health, it's okay not to be okay. And perhaps I've truly embraced that. But I knew it wasn't the real answer, but at least it was something I could say. Then as time went along, I realized that what was going on with me and my audiences, and a lot of people were saying you're inspiring people by sharing your vulnerability. And I got involved with a graduate assessment day for a company in London, where all the graduates had to do a talk about something they were passionate about. And they were all brilliant. But then Abigail stood up. And Abigail stood up that day and said, hi, everyone, I've got bipolar. And for the first time that day, people put their mobile phones down, the room went silent, and everyone hung on Abigail's every single word. And she was the first person they took on. Because what I saw Abigail do that day was inspire people by sharing vulnerability. And I'm going to talk about that a lot this morning. So I started saying to people, the reason I'm avoiding panic attacks is that it's okay not to be okay, and it's not a weakness, and I'm inspiring people by sharing vulnerability. But I still knew it wasn't the answer. I never thought I'd find the cure for panic attacks, and cure is a good word to use because I'll never properly be cured. Before this morning, you know, I had a moment where I thought, I bet this morning I've become breathless, and in front of all of you this morning, I won't be able to speak. What I've noticed is the difference is these days, when I think that, I say to myself, well, have a panic attack. Let you all see and listen what one feels like to have, and share with you the whole experience. By allowing myself to have one, I'm being kind to myself. I'm showing myself compassion. So I think the reason I get away without having panic attacks, I've discovered what they call self-compassion, which is all about being kinder to yourself. And again, you're going to find this morning with the questions you're going to ask me, there's going to be a theme running through about the value of being kind to both yourself to reduce your anxiety levels during this pandemic, and also the value of being kinder to your employees during a time like this to keep them emotionally engaged. But as I say, I'm sure we're going to come back to that again. But thanks, Claire.
Thank you, David. That makes complete sense. So what impact, going back to the current situation really, what impact do you believe coronavirus will have on our collective mental health? And how many of us do you think will be impacted? I've been asked that question many times in the last month about how many of us will have our mental health impacted on by this pandemic. And it's every single one of us. The first time I ever put a deck together about mental health, I sent it out to a few people for feedback. And they all came back and said the same thing. They all said, you haven't got any statistics around mental health. And I said, take this in the right spirit. But every statistic I've ever read about mental health is complete bullshit. I said, no one knew about me for 36 years.
And since I've been doing this work, I've literally had thousands of people contact me to say that they suffer in silence because of fear of stigma. A very sad statistic for you, but 4 out of 10 suicides now come as a complete shock for family and friends, which means 40% of people manage to mask their mental health and the people that love them most. And supposedly, again, although I don't know where they get this from, for every 20 people who dial into work sick due to poor mental health, only one person tells the truth. The rest of the people would rather say they've got diarrhea, they've got a migraine, they've got problems with kids, they've got transport. So I've never changed my view that it's every single one of us will suffer at some degree with poor mental health. It's not 1 in 4. One of the reasons we think in this way is that we think that you've only got poor mental health if you're diagnosed with depression or diagnosed with anxiety or diagnosed with bipolar. You don't have to be diagnosed by a professional to have poor mental health. A number of people listening here this morning will have had a disturbed night's sleep. They may have woken up 2 or 3 times or woken up like me about 5 o'clock this morning and not been able to get back to sleep. A number of people listening this morning will have low energy today. They don't quite understand why, but they're feeling very flat with very little energy. And a lot of us at the moment are struggling to stay focused and concentrate because we've got a lot going on in our mind. Some days we're worried about one of our children. Some days we're worried about mum or dad. Some days we're worried about our partner. Some days we're worried about finances. Some days we're naturally worried about health. And some days we're worried about the viability of our job at the moment. Well, everything I've just mentioned there is poor mental health. We've all got health, both physical and mental. And at some stage every year, both our physical health and our mental health could be better. So once we start talking about 1 in 1, by the way, we start to destigmatize mental health and make it easier for everybody to talk about it. When we hear those statistics like 1 in 4, I just can't help feeling we're stigmatizing the one. One of my issues is I think we've changed the meaning of the word mental to be a word that none of us want to associate with. It's seen as a very, very negative word. And I'll give you a good example of this. We all know Google Images very well. If any of us typed into Google Images today, we're very likely to see images of Arnold Schwarzenegger, Usain Bolt, Cristiano Ronaldo. And generally, most of the images will be of very athletic bodies. I didn't type into Google Images great physical health, just physical health. In contrast, if you type into Google Images mental health, the most common images that come up are people with their heads in their hands, people looking very sad. And that really annoys me because why is mental health bringing up negative images and physical health positive images? Well, in there lies part of the reason why we struggle to talk about mental health. I went through my phone recently and just out of interest, I wanted to count up how many of my friends have currently got the services of a personal trainer. And I counted 7. And do you know why I know that? I know that because they don't shop about it. They're very keen to tell me that they've got a PT. And even during this pandemic, they have a virtual PT. The reason I'm sharing that is that I'm not knocking that. That's brilliant. It's fantastic they've got a personal trainer. But I wonder how many of my friends have got a personal trainer for this thing in here called the mind. I wouldn't know, would I? Because that personal trainer is called a counselor or a therapist, and it's too embarrassing to talk about. I won't expect people to answer this question this morning, but what's more important, the health of our mind or developing bingo wings? I think we know the answer. It's the health of our mind. Out of interest, listening this morning, and I'm going to refer back to it later, in the chat function, would you mind just putting in there a score out of 10 for how you're feeling today? I'm not going to come back to any of you specifically about why you've given a score. I'm just interested to see the range of scores. So in the chat function, can some of you please just type in a score out of 10 for how you're feeling today? But thank you. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you, David. So, I mean, yeah, going back to, I suppose, the general situation right now that we all find ourselves in, you're obviously a qualified mental health counsellor. So can you tell us how we should all be protecting our mental health during this pandemic? Because as you say, we are all experiencing this right now.
Absolutely. I'm lucky to be running workshops for the last few years, where one of the breakout groups is, what do we do to become mentally fitter? How do we build our own personal resilience? And so I've had a lot of insight as to what people do to look after their well-being. And I'll share some of this with you now. I think without doubt, the top two answers are, number one is sleep. We've all been to bed very tired and been really worried about something going on in our lives. But after a good night's sleep, we wake up the next day and we're no longer worried about that issue. And it's because we're no longer tired. When you get tired, you're not sleeping properly. Everything seems so much darker. And one of the other top answers is around physical health again. I'm asked so often these days about the relationship between physical health and mental health. And they're so closely related. One of the reasons the governments around the world, despite these rules about lockdown, have been keen to allow people to have physical exercise, is they recognize the value of physical health in helping you with your mental well-being. I also want to talk this morning about me time. It's really important that we have we look after ourselves and find time for us. I know that it's very difficult to accept. The most important person in the world to love is not your mum, it's not your kids, it's not your partner, it's yourself. Because if you look after yourself, you're then in a position to look after people around you. We've all been on an aeroplane where they say that if the oxygen masks come down, and even if you've got young children with you, you put your oxygen mask on first, because if you don't look after yourself, you're not in a position to look after other people. And that really applies now. So I'd ask everyone here today to really make sure you're creating me time for you. And funnily enough, me time is often more important, more difficult to create when you're working from home, because the moment you get off webinars like this, if you've got family around, they then presume that you're not working. I'll give you a really good example about when you don't give yourself me time. I was working with the managing director of I'm still actually working with him. I started working with him a couple of years ago, and he was one of those people that nothing fazed him in life. He was finding his career relatively easy and nothing stressed him in the workplace. But for the first time in his life, he felt that he was failing. And what he felt he was failing at was being a dad. When he first became a dad, he knew he was a busy guy, so he knew he had to create more time for mum and baby. But what he did was, he did three things. He gave up his Arsenal season ticket. Some people may say it's a good thing. He stopped running, and he stopped car rallying. And we reckon within 3 or 4 months, he developed postnatal depression. And he was a very miserable dad, a very miserable partner to his wife. So we got him back going to Arsenal again. We got him running again, and we got him car rallying again. He's now a father of 2 children, and he's now a much happier father, and he's a much happier dad, because he's now looking after himself. He's rediscovered the value of me time. So I'd ask everybody listening in here today to really think about me time. And another story I'd love to share about how we look after ourselves during times like this is one that comes from a child. Now, we know children sometimes see things more clearly than we do. Well, a child in a school last year said to his teacher, "Teacher, why don't you have playtime? Because the kids have playtime, so isn't it fair that teachers have playtime too?" And the teacher just sort of smiled it off. And but fortunately, later that day, the teacher said to the head teacher, one of the kids suggested today that the teachers had playtime, and the head teacher said, "What a fantastic idea!" So a few weeks later in that school, they had a role reversal. All the teachers were told, without exception, you've got to go out into the playground. And all the kids were told, you're not getting playtime, teachers are instead. Now, you know what kids are like, Claire. They thought that was the best playtime ever. The kids looked forward more to that playtime than any other playtime they'd had in that entire school year. Now, this story has quite a sad ending because basically the kids were left really disappointed. They all got the best points to look out at the playground. And they wanted to see the teachers running around the playground, having fun, chasing each other, having a laugh. But they all stood there like boring adults. Some of them, I dare say, on their phones. And just the kids just didn't like what they saw. Now, the reason I share this story with everyone on here today is that we give kids playtime for 4 reasons. Firstly, it's a break between two pieces of work to re-energize you. Secondly, it's fresh air and hopefully sunshine. Thirdly, it's that crucial social interaction. And lastly, it's physical exercise. Now, when we become adults, we need playtime as much as we did when we were children. But so many of us forget to have playtime. So I'd say to all of you in your days at the moment, because it's really important to try and set some boundaries when you're working from home. But all of us at the end of this webinar at about 11 o'clock this morning, we should probably be having our first playtime of the day, where we get some fresh air maybe, or we ring up a friend and have some social interaction. And then we should be having a lunch break, you know, a couple of hours later. And then we should be having another break this afternoon when again we perhaps get some fresh air and social interaction. And then we should know clearly what time our school day finishes today. So I say to all of you on here, are you getting enough playtime? You would go crazy if you've got kids and heard they weren't getting playtime at school anymore. Well, you should be getting angry at yourself if you're not giving yourself enough playtime. So again, that's my advice as to how we need to look after ourselves at the moment, and not just during this pandemic, on an ongoing basis anyway. And I think the other things that people should be doing is also just still give your things, you know, yourself things to look forward to. You know, work out the people in your life who make you laugh and try and spend some time with them. I know it's got to be virtually at the moment. Certainly look after your health, you know, eat well and drink healthily, and just put yourself first. It never has been so important, as I said right up front here, to really look after your own well-being at the moment, so you're in a position to look after other people around you. Would people please be happy to share on the chat function again things that you've been doing during lockdown to look after yourselves? What have you been doing when you've been working from home to really sort of try and look after your well-being? Be really interested to see what people write in here. Thanks for sharing all those scores earlier today. I can see we've got 4s and 7s and 5s and 8s and 6s and a 6.6. And we've even got some 10s. I'm going to come back to it later. It just shows you again the rain. We may be all in the same boat at the moment, but we're all going through very, very different challenges for ourselves. And it's really important to understand that. But I'm going to come back to that a lot later. So just seeing if anyone's posted in here. There's so many of you on here. There's so much interaction in the chat. It's fantastic to see. But it's just taking me a while to get down to the bottom here. I know that I've been doing these every day at the moment, but so many of us are going to become expert bakers. We're suddenly baking cakes for the first time. So many of us are spending more time gardening. Hopefully, a lot of us are sort of running for the first time and doing more physical exercise. We're spending more time with our children doing, you know, puzzles and quizzes. It's fantastic to see. I think, and a lot of conversations I've had around this is that hopefully there will be, although this is, let's be real about it, this is a really, really tough time. But hopefully when we come out the other side of this, there'll be some real lessons learned around this time, and that we can all be kinder to ourselves and work out ways of spending more time with the people in our life that really matter. I can't quite at the moment. But
David saying, you know, varying from going for a walk.
Oh, thanks, Claire.
Running and drinking a lot of wine. Walking at lunch hour whilst having a chat with family and friends. So there's a range of answers. Yeah, as you say, there's so many people answering. It's hard to scroll down and keep up.
Thanks for sharing that, Claire. And as I say, let's hope that we can find ways in the future of maintaining some of those great things that we're doing at the moment. And as I say, remember my little story about playtime today, because you know, even if we go back to working in normal environments, it's still really important that we have those breaks and think about the reasons why we give kids playtime. Thanks, Claire.
Thanks, David. No, that's great advice for us all individually. So moving back to where we are in terms of the current situation and the fact that we're all working remotely, have you got particular advice to give us to help us stay emotionally connected with our teams right now?
Yeah, if it's okay, Claire, I'm just going to pull up a few slides for people to have a look at. Hold on.
Of course.
Yeah, so I've been asked a lot in recent weeks about how are we going to keep our remote workers energized and engaged at the moment. So I'm just going to run through what appears to be best and what appears to be working best out there at the moment. Can you see my slide there? Just check.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, fabulous. I think without doubt at the moment, the number one, employees must feel that you're giving them priority over business performance. I totally accept that for some very task-focused leaders and managers, that feels quite difficult to do because for some of us at the moment, there's some real challenges in keeping our businesses going. But all the evidence suggests that if you want to keep your employees engaged, you must make them feel as if their priority, that your priority at the moment is their well-being. I'll give you a couple of examples of that I had only last week. Someone said to me that they'd received an email from their boss, and the email absolutely smacked of distrust. There was no empathy in the email for what that person may be going through, and it was all about the needs of the business. And there was even reference to the fact we've got technology to make sure we can check people working at the moment. And that person certainly felt very disengaged from their business and very unhappy because that email was all about the needs of the business. Within an hour, I spoke to somebody else who said to me that they'd been so inspired by a call they just had from their boss. If they were currently asked to work without being paid for the next 3 months to protect the viability of the business, they would do so. So naturally, I asked them, do you mind me asking what your boss said to make you feel so inspired? And what they said to me was that the conversation was virtually all about their well-being and the well-being of their family. The boss was so interested to make sure that they were okay at the moment. Yes, they went on to talk about work, but the absolute priority of the business appeared to be employee well-being. And that person clearly was highly engaged. And I've also read that it's really evidence-based now that during a crisis, if you put the priority of your employees first, when we come out this the other side, you're going to be in a lot stronger position as a business because people are just going to be so much more loyal, so much more committed, and so much more engaged. I can't emphasize enough that number one there. The second one is about line managers understanding the true value of being kind to both the employees and the business. I'm allowed to share with you some insight from HSBC Bank. Now, they're considered one of the best employers in the world around well-being. And about 3 years ago, they commissioned the biggest ever well-being survey ever undertaken, which involved 76,000 employees. And they asked lots of them, they asked lots of questions, but one of the questions was a very black and white question, which simply said, are HSBC interested in your well-being, yes or no? Now, they must have asked that question because they were confident of getting a really good response. But 38,000 employees said no. 50% of their workforce said this company doesn't care about me. So they were mortified. Now, they drilled into the data very quickly to understand, is there a common denominator? And it won't surprise you that they found that common denominator very quickly. And the common denominator was your line manager. They then drilled further into the data to understand what is your manager doing or not doing to make you think this company doesn't care about you. And it was really basic stuff. But number one was in your one-to-one meeting, those managers were going straight into talk about KPIs and sales and customers and work, as opposed to starting that conversation. Forget about HSBC Bank at the moment. How are you? Now, that was 3 years ago. It's even more important now during this pandemic to start conversations with employees. Forget about work for the moment. How are you? It only takes a few minutes, but by giving them priority, as I said in the point one, you're far more likely to keep them engaged and very committed to you as an employer. Number three, and I've already touched on this one as well earlier, but it's so important at the moment. It's really important that senior people share vulnerability to inspire their workforce. I'm often asked why senior leaders still see this as weakness. I think most of us on this call today are from the UK, and we understand that British stiff upper lip, and it's quite a generational thing. But trust me, I'm yet to see an example where a leader or a manager has shared vulnerability where it hasn't helped inspire their people around them. Again, it's evidence-based now. I read a very good article recently that a CEO, for example, is more likely to lose his job in the boardroom if he doesn't show weakness. Because when you share the human side of you, you inspire people around you and you keep progressing them with you, so to speak. We're all getting used in recent weeks to these sort of Zoom calls and Teams calls where we can see into each other's homes. And I've heard several times that even senior people, when they've been on the video, one of the kids has popped into the background, or a dog or a cat, and they've had one of those family moments. Well, those family moments are humanizing leaders at the moment and actually making them more connected with their workforce, because they've never seen the big boss before pick up his cat and put him on his lap and stroke the cat. And again, this is time for more human moments, and it's okay to not be okay. And every single one of us, including every manager, is going to have a day when you're only 4 out of 10 at the moment. And it's okay to share that, because when you share that, you're giving other people permission to also talk about the fact that they're not okay too. And the last one on here, again, this word kindness. Everybody needs to be kind to themselves, as it will build resilience during tough times. I've just talked a lot just now about putting yourself first. Well, also when you're kinder to yourself, it also helps you to see the value of being kinder to other people around you. And let's just say again, let's hope what comes out of this pandemic is a real sort of kickstart to a compassionate style of leadership where everyone is both kinder to themselves and people around them. I'm just going to move into some key tips for managers coming out of that. I've already made this one really clear. Try and start all work calls with "How are you?" and listen non-judgmentally before asking about work. Secondly, ensure the tone of all communication is empathic and displays trust. I've had some managers say to me, "I don't want to ring my team too often because it sounds like I'm..." From what I'm hearing at the moment, people working remotely want more contact than normal, not less. If you get the tone right and the messaging right, it won't come across like you're checking up on them from a work point of view. It comes across that you care about them, and you're just checking in with them as human beings. So you can contact people at the moment more than you would do normally. If you get it right, it does not come across like you're checking up on them. The third one is thinking about the language we use. And this is really important. You'll hear me talk a lot about we've got to get better at talking about mental health. The worst thing I could say to anybody is really worried about your mental health. They're likely to go into a shutdown mode because it's too invasive. A really good system to use, because it works globally, is because we all understand the score out of 10. We all know 7 out of 10 is okay. We all know anything above that 8 or 9 is fabulous. And we know anything under 7, something's dragging that person down a bit. Now, I asked you all just now to give me, scores out of 10, and we saw the range that you're in. Now, one of my suggestions is that we do this on a regular basis, because what you're looking for is changes in people's behaviour. So if Claire was always a 7, it's the day she's a 6 that I say to Claire, not in a team environment, but I perhaps call Claire a bit later that day and say, "Claire, you're always a 7 out of 10. Do you mind me asking, you're only a 6 today, is everything okay?" You might tell me, because we're talking about a language of numbers as opposed to drilling into Claire's mental health. You still may not, but there's more of a chance of opening up a well-being conversation when you're asking people the scores out of 10. And as I say, you're looking for a change in someone's usual score, because Claire's 7 out of 10, maybe Dan's 8 out of 10, maybe somebody else's 9 out of 10. You're just looking for changes in those scores. And the last one on here is about try and speak, as I said, to employees every day. And just remember again, not all conversations have to be about work. I listened to a talk 10 years ago from a very successful Japanese CEO. And he ran an amazingly successful business. And he was asked to leave us all with one golden nugget about how you run an amazingly brilliant organization. And I always remember he said, I've got 8 direct reports. I try to speak to all of them at least every other day, but only half of those conversations might be about work. And he sat down. And a lot of people that day felt quite shortchanged by his answer, thinking, is that it? But some of us thought, you know what? He absolutely gets how to get the best out of your employees. And this is all about engagement. I often talk about Sally's dog, and I'll explain what I mean by that. A very good boss of mine said to me a few years ago, David, how's Sally's dog? And I laughed and I said, I didn't know Sally had a dog. And my boss didn't laugh at all and said, well, you should do. Sally's dog is a life, and Sally's dog's been really poorly recently. I suggest the next time you see Sally, you ask her how her dog is. So guess what? The next time I saw Sally, I said, Sally, how's your dog? And she told me. After that day, my working relationship with Sally went to a different level. She seemed to become a real advocate of mine. And she worked for me for the next few years after that. And she worked very hard for me, very loyally for me. But that all changed, or seemed to change, the day I got to know about Sally and her dog. So that may sound, I was going to say, a very fluffy conversation. I'm not sure how fluffy her dog was, but hopefully you get the point I'm making. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you, David. No, that's all great. I'll just say some of the comments coming in on the Q&A. We've got a lot of people doing Joe Wicks workouts and lavender baths, and yoga is quite popular.
Brilliant.
So,
Brilliant.
I mean, you've covered some of this already, David, but just are there any other signs we should be looking out for, given that we're all working remotely, that might indicate somebody in our team is struggling with their mental health right now?
Yeah, I'll just come off my slides. Yeah, I'm asked again a lot at the moment, how can we spot signs that a loved one, family member, a friend or a work colleague is not in a good place? Now, again, I've run workshops on this very regularly. And if I asked everybody now, and I'm not going to ask what are the signs you might look for, we could actually produce a list of over 100 things, which can be a bit overwhelming. But what I'm going to say now, hopefully will simplify it for you. You're looking for any change in behavior whatsoever, any change in behavior. The person who's normally mild-mannered, who becomes argumentative, the person who's normally full of energy, who's very, very listless, the person who generally is very well groomed, is looking very unkempt. You are looking for any change in behavior whatsoever. Now, as a mental health counsellor, I'm trained to notice, not interpret, because when you interpret, you can be guilty of judging. However, we are allowed to call out a change in behavior because it's factual, something you've noticed. So if I notice, for example, that Claire, as I say, was normally mild-mannered, biting my head off, it is okay for me to say to Claire, generally as part of a wider conversation, Claire, I've noticed recently you become very short-tempered. Are you okay? And she still may go into denial. There's more chance that she'll be honest with me because I've noticed a factual change in behavior. So in summary to that question, Claire, we're looking for any change in behavior whatsoever. And then it's okay to call it out, as long as you put into that conversation piece, I've noticed recently this change in behavior. Are you okay? I often refer to the stigma of mental health as being the whole wall of silence around it. We find it very difficult to talk about. We are so worried to say to family friend or a colleague anything about mental health because we feel that we might make them feel even more awkward and we might make the situation even worse. My suggestion is that we just got to get a bit braver at calling out changes in behavior and asking if you're okay. I'll give you a quick example around that, by the way. A very good friend of mine said to me in mid-January of last year, I'm worried about my son, Paul. He said he was disappearing after meals at Christmas time, and he's regularly disappeared after meals since Christmas. When he was a teenager, he went through a phase of pretending to eat. And he said to me, me and his mum are hardly sleeping. David, please put your counsellor's hat on and let us know what we need to do. And I said to him, this is what you need to do. You sit your son down and you say to your son, look, mum and dad really love you. We noticed at Christmas time you were disappearing after meal times. Are you okay? And my friend looked at me and said, do you mean I talked to him? And I said, yeah. I said, if he was walking around the house with a limp, you'd say to him straight away, have you got a bad leg? If he was walking around the house holding his belly, you'd say, have you got a stomach ache? But because it's mental health, you can't even talk to your own son. And it's already a month since Christmas. Just tell him that you love him, tell him what you've noticed, and ask him if he's okay. And I remember my friend saying to me, why did it take you to tell me that? And I said, because that's what most of us do. We, open up conversations about mental health. I got off an aeroplane in Edinburgh last year, and at the time I had a bit of a dodgy knee. And like we all do, when I got off the aeroplane, I turned my phone back on, and it went ping, 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 ping. I think I had 4 texts from family and friends asking me how my knee was. Now, don't get me wrong, that was lovely. But how many texts have I had in my life about my mental health? None, because it's something we don't talk about. So if we want to really try and break this stigma of mental health, we just got to find better ways of talking about it, but thinking about the language that we choose to use. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you, David. Sounds so simple, doesn't it? But really so important to just have the conversation and ask the question. So yeah. Going back to kind of the current situation again, what specific tips, you may have, some of this you've covered a little bit, but what would you tell us about protecting our well-being now that we're all working from home in particular?
I'll just go back to the slide again, Claire, that's okay. Hang on. Yeah, these are just sort of some hints and tips for those of you working at home, which the vast majority at the moment, and probably most of you are doing these already. But certainly try and leave the house every day, even if it's standing on your doorstep. And if you've got a garden, but get out in the garden. Even move around the house. A lot of us, when we're working from home, there's one particular place we work from. Don't stay there all day. I had the virus. I was in the same room for 21 days. And when I look back now, I even moved around the room. I had a desk and a chair in the corner of the bedroom, and I'd spend quite a lot of time sitting there. But then I'd also take the laptop and go and lay on the bed and do some stuff from there as well. So, just try and move around the house. Go and sit on the sofa for a while and take your laptop with you. Don't sit at a desk all day long. I know sometimes we have to negotiate with other family members because we tend to get very noisy and you have to think about each other. Please try and just think about ways to re-energize yourself. Put some boundaries around your work. I mentioned this earlier on today, but when you're working from home, it's really important to give yourself a start time, a time to have lunch, a time to have breaks, and a time when you're going to shut your laptop down. Really important to do. I noticed, by the way, that some days I'm not particularly good at doing this myself, despite the fact I preach it. And the way to make sure I do it is to plan it the day before. So when I'm planning my day out, to make sure I plan in times where I've got downtime. Try and stay focused and switch off distractions. One of the rooms I work in this house, I shut the door because we've got 2 gorgeous cats here, and the cats are forever coming in and disturbing me, and I'm very easily distracted. So I've tried to work out what I need to do to stay focused myself. Again, the importance of social interaction. It's really important that, when you're normally working in an office or a factory or wherever you work, you don't realize how often during a day you smile at other people and you check in with other people. When you're working from home, we have to make a bigger effort to maintain social interaction. It's really important. And this one, again, is possibly the most important. Every single one of you on this webinar listening in this morning is a unique human being, and you know yourself better than anybody else. So really think about what you need to do to have a good day for you, because we're all a bit different. To some of us, physical exercise is a 10K run. To others, it's just a walk around the garden. But know what you need to do to have a good day. And I'll just move on, Claire, just to giving some suggestions specifically about your mental health during the coronavirus. And again, I'm sure a lot of you have been doing this because we're a number of weeks in now. But limit the time you spend watching things that aren't making you feel any better. when this pandemic first started, I was fixated on the news, and these days I probably check in with the news once a day. Some days just not at all, because I found it was dragging me down. We all know these days there's many places where we're getting information from. Try and stick with trusted sources of information. Those of you into Twitter, you might find you want to mute some keywords at the moment, just to stop following things that are dragging you down again. I'm in a number of WhatsApp groups. I'm also on Facebook, and some days it's overwhelming. My phone is forever making noises with people trying to send me videos to make me laugh, and some days it's just too much. Also had to change some of my statuses with friends on Facebook, because some people are just continually posting stuff that again is alarming me, and I've stayed friends with them. They don't know, but at the moment I just can't see their posts, and I'm glad I've done that. But at the same time, stay connected with people, particularly if you're working completely remotely at the moment. And again, avoid burnout. I think we all hoped at the beginning that this pandemic, a few weeks lockdown, it'll all be sorted. I think we realise now that we're in this for the next few months. We've really got to do things to look after our well-being in the long term. And again, exercise, eat well, and stay hydrated. I'll come off the slides now, Claire, if that's okay.
Thank you, David. I think all of that really resonates. I would say with everyone, it definitely does with me. And I think the key one around the news and social media and limiting, because that's a killer. And we've all got to moderate that, I think, and be aware. So I'm aware of the time now, David. It's 10 to 11, and I think we will have quite a lot of questions coming in, and I'd like to at least endeavour to cover as many of those as possible. So unfortunately, I'm sure we won't be able to cover all questions, but Dan has been having a look at questions as they've come in. So I'm going to pass back to Dan now, and we'll cover off some questions from the attendees. Thank you. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Claire.
Thanks, Claire. Hi, everyone. So many questions here. We've had over 374, so we can't get through all of those, but we will make sure we share every single comment and question with David at some point today. Some are relating to kind of broadband connections, so a recording of this will be available on our website. We just need to give us a couple of hours to get it uploaded there. We're also going to share the slides pack that David's been showing with every single participant of the call, together with David's details. People want to get in touch with you, David. Okay.
Thanks, Dan. Right.
Lots of people from the NHS on the call today, David, and they're asking for info and resources for frontline staff. So first of all, we should say thanks to our frontline staff. Unbelievable job, but clearly they're at the front end of this.
Yeah, clearly there's going to be people who are going to suffer with PTSD as a result of being on the front line. I'm no personal expert in PTSD. I did see some of those questions coming in earlier. So what I will do outside of this call, Dan, is just look up myself some resources around PTSD, specifically for frontline workers, because it's not something I'm here and now an expert on myself. And there's going to be so many specific individual circumstances. But if there are a lot of people from the NHS on here today, you are doing an amazing job, and we are, again, if one of the things that comes out of this pandemic is the value placed on you guys and girls out there doing an awesome job, is just one of those things we all want to see taken forward after this.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, a number of questions about how do I express vulnerability. There's a couple of questions relate to new working environments where people also haven't met their colleagues. They've gone straight into a lockdown situation. And how do they get this vulnerability out there to new people?
I think if there's ever been the right time to do it, it's now, because I think we all know we're being encouraged more than ever at the moment during this pandemic to be really open about our vulnerabilities. So now is the right time to do that. Even if you're relatively new in a business, equally, only share what you want to share. If you've got some very big stuff that's gone on in your life, don't think you've suddenly got to open up to more than one person. and perhaps you may want to do it over a period of time. Speaking as a mental health counsellor, when clients first come to me, in that first session, I'll ask them, perhaps what's triggered them to come along to that session. They may take 5 or 6 sessions or more before they share the whole story. So when you're sharing your vulnerabilities, you don't always have to share straight away everything, and just only what you feel comfortable doing. And again, where you can help colleagues, we talked today on here about the language of 1 to 10. You may just want to say to somebody, without giving them too much detail initially, look, I don't want to go into detail today, but I'm only a 3 out of 10, and I'm not in a good place at the moment. When I'm ready, I'll tell you a bit more about why I'm a 3 out of 10. You don't have to, again, think about the language that you use. But overall, my advice, again, I'm still yet to see anyone who's really regretted sharing vulnerabilities and sharing how they're really feeling. I'm sure there have been cases, so let's be real, but I haven't heard of one. And I've been out here 3 years now, and so many people have messaged me to say that, David, today was the day. I've shared with somebody for the first time how I'm feeling. And think about who that person might be. Sometimes it's your partner that you haven't shared something with. Sometimes it's your best friend. Sometimes it's your best friend at work. Sometimes it's your boss. Sometimes it's try and talk to somebody and perhaps test it. Think about which person it's going to be that you share those vulnerabilities with. It's still not easy. It's still a brave thing to do, because once there's almost no going back, and that's the fear of this whole stigma around mental health. But all the evidence and everything I've seen, it is okay not to be okay. And you'll be so surprised as well if you start sharing vulnerabilities for the first time, how so many people in your life will say, oh my God, if only you'd have told me that years ago. I suffer exactly the same and I've never shared it with either. You will be amazed how many people, because when I first did it in 2016, family, best friends, colleagues at work, so many of them suddenly opened up to me as well. So bear that one in mind. You'll think it's just you. It won't be. So many people will be feeling like you feel.
Great, thank you, David. A couple around, could you please again explain how you deal with panic attacks and anxiety? How do you deal with that? How do you kind of limit the symptoms?
Again, I must stress here, we're all unique human beings. I'm one of those people who's really anti-labeling, because my panic attacks might be very different to someone else's panic attacks. And so, for example, as a mental health counsellor, none of my clients are aware about my panic attacks because theirs might be very different to mine. But I'll say a few things about it. With my type of panic attack, what's really helped me is giving myself permission to have them. With the irony being, because I'm allowing myself to have them, it's taking the pressure off me. And by taking the pressure off, my anxiety levels come down, with the irony being I don't have one, or on most occasions I don't. So that thing about being kinder to yourself, and it's okay to get anxious, it's okay to get panicky, you may find actually stops you becoming as panicky and as anxious. Equally, it's a number of people are going to suffer heightened anxiety and panic attacks during this pandemic. There still is a time to contact your GP, because you may need to see a health professional about it. And there's equally a time where sometimes some people do need medication. We've got this stigma about medication around mental health because we fear we're going to be on antidepressants or beta blockers for life. When you think about a diabetic who's on insulin, there's no stigma around taking insulin for life. But so I get so frustrated that we have this fear about being put on some form of medication. But for some people, it changes their life and it is necessary. Equally, one of those techniques we say to use if you're getting panicky or very anxious, try and sort of suddenly find different things in the room to focus upon, because it can take your mind away from what you're panicking about. I think they say you have to count 5 different things in the room that are taking place to bring your anxiety levels down again. For me, it's been being kinder to myself. and allowing myself to become anxious and panicky stops me becoming as anxious and panicky. But there's many different sorts of panic attacks and anxious states out there. Thank you, Dan.
Okay, just got a couple more, David. I'm working so hard, I can't get away from my laptop. This is worse than it's ever been before. There is no escape from this. Claire's shaking her head in the background. I don't know if you can see that. David, how do we get away from it?
Dan, again, I've used the line it's evidence-based a few times today, but it is evidence-based. But if you're sitting there now thinking, I haven't got time for a lunch break today, if you go for a 30-minute walk at lunchtime, you will achieve more this afternoon than if you don't, because it will re-energize you. If you attempt to work through the day without a break, you'll start to slow down. You'll start to move things around your desk. You'll start to procrastinate. You won't have as clear of thought. So we take breaks so that we can actually achieve more in the day for both ourselves, our families, and our employers. It's evidence-based, it's factual. So we've got to find time to have those sort of breaks. Easier said than done, I know at times, but let's keep it real. I know it's easier said than done at times, but it does work.
Got it. Okay, David, thank you so much for what you've done today. You are an absolute inspiration. Some of the comments we're getting through in the chat bar at the moment are just amazing. We've had people diving in from all over the place. I must quickly mention Bolton College, great supporter of Morgan Hunt. Thank you so many for joining us. Sandwell College, Newham College, Glasgow College, Lambeth College, all the people at the NHS. Chichester Local Authority seems to be here en masse. There can't be anything going on in Chichester today apart from listening to this. But what a great way to spend your time. Bernardo's are here, St Mungo's are here, YMCA, and lots of people from John Lewis. So all those people, David, if this was a real live meeting, would form a queue and want to shake your hand and personally thank you for what you've done for all of us today. It really is great. I also know that you would stay here till midnight, shaking those hands, talking to those people, giving them time and really sharing, you know, your knowledge of what they're going through right now. So thank you so much. I'd love to do this again. This is clearly such a really, you know, positive moment to have these conversations. And I hope we can get together in a similar format in the very near future.
Thanks,
so let's hope that can happen.
Thank you. It's been a privilege, and the fact that so many people have joined in today and the level of interaction has been absolutely awesome. I will try and get back to everybody with you know who does contact me. It may take a bit of time from the sound of the amount of questions that come in, but thank you again for this opportunity to work with Morgan Hunt today. It's a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, David. So just before everybody logs off, we are going to be emailing, as I said, through David's slide pack. There's a full recording of this session, which will be on our website, and we'll put the link in that communication. I think we're also sending through a survey monkey to find out and understand how you found this session, but also to ask you about what types of similar sessions you would like us to run in the future. And I understand that Claire has a whole host of sessions which she's about to launch on everybody in the very near future. Is that right, Claire?
That is right, Dan. Watch this space, everyone. Thank you.
Am I being a bad boss? Am I over-egging this and putting too much pressure on there?
Not at all, not at all. It's a good way to communicate. I think we're going to have to use these platforms more going forward, and it's just so fantastic to see that hundreds of people can come to a virtual session that probably couldn't physically make a meeting. So there is some good upsides to this current situation. Thanks, David. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Bye.